I found my wife's affair with her boss, and now she's suing me for half our $750, $0 house. Little did I know she secretly transferred her shares to her brother weeks before she filed, claiming I abused her to justify taking everything. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling everyone I caught my wife cheating on me, but here we are. The craziest part is how it all started with a gut feeling, then spiraled into a mess I couldn't have imagined. To give you the quick version, my wife Emily was acting weird for months, little things but enough to make me suspicious. I thought maybe I was overthinking it, but then I found out the truth, and honestly, it hit me like a freight train. Emily and I had been together for about 8 years. We met in college, got married right after, and we built what I thought was a pretty solid life. We had a beautiful house in the suburbs, a decent savings account, and a lot of shared plans for the future. I worked as a project manager at a construction firm, and she was a marketing executive at a pretty big company. Everything seemed normal until it was. It all started when I noticed her phone going missing more often. She'd hide it when I came near, or she'd rush to answer calls in another room. I brushed it off at first, telling myself maybe she was just busy or stressed with work. But then I started catching her in little lies, missing texts, odd hours on her phone bill, and a few odd receipts from places I didn't recognize. She'd say she was at a client dinner or working late. I didn't have solid proof, but I knew she was hiding something. Still, I wanted to believe she was just stressed or maybe having an affair with a coworker, not the boss though. That part I never expected. One night I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. It was a woman's voice, friendly but with a kind of knowing tone. She called herself Lisa and said she worked with Emily. She was just calling to confirm her schedule for the next week. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I saved the number. Then I started noticing texts from Lisa on Emily's phone, and they weren't just "hey, see you at work" kind of messages. They were flirtatious, suggestive, and downright inappropriate. I could see the way Emily responded, the emojis she sent, her quick replies. It was obvious they'd been more than just colleagues. I decided to dig a little deeper. I installed a tracking app on her phone, which I know sounds invasive, but I was desperate. I needed to know what was going on. A few days later, I saw her meet Lisa at a coffee shop downtown. The way she looked, the way she kissed her cheek, it was clear they weren't just friends. My stomach dropped. I watched her from across the street, heart pounding, trying to process what I was seeing. Emily was having an affair with her boss, Daniel. That's the part that still makes my skin crawl. I never imagined Emily, the woman I loved and trusted, would do something like this. I kept watching, trying to gather more evidence, but I knew I had enough to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The betrayal was too raw, too real. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, and I did know how to wake up. It was the moment I realized my life was about to change forever, and I had no idea how I'd come out of it. So, I finally decided I couldn't keep this secret anymore. I needed to confront Emily face to face, get her to admit what I already knew was true. I planned to do it the next day after work. I wanted her to see I wasn't naive or blind, that I had evidence and I wasn't going to be played for a fool. But I also knew that whatever she said, my world was about to shatter. That evening I came home early from work, my mind racing with everything I'd seen and heard. I was tense, my hands trembling a little. I wanted to catch her off guard, make her admit everything. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. She looked up and gave me that fake innocent smile she always used when she was guilty but trying to act normal. "Hey babe," she said, her voice a little too sweet. "You're home early." I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at her for a second, trying to hold my emotions in check. Then I pulled out the phone I'd been secretly recording and played the videos I'd taken of her meeting Lisa, kissing her, flirting. Her face instantly changed. Her eyes widened and her smile froze. "What is this?" I asked, voice trembling but trying to sound calm. "What the hell is going on, Emily?" She blinked rapidly, trying to come up with a lie, but I wasn't buying it. She started to deny everything, of course, said it was just work, that Lisa was just a friend, that I was reading too much into it. But I had screenshots, video footage, and her own words saved in my notes. I threw the evidence on the table. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? You've been lying to me for months. How long has this been going on? Did you even love me? I asked, voice cracking with anger and heartbreak. She looked furious now, her face twisting into a snarl. You're crazy. You're just jealous. You're overreacting because I've been working late. You're imagining things, and honestly, you're just insecure. I do know what you want from me. That's when I saw the real bitch come out. Emily's eyes flashed with something darker. She started yelling, accusing me of being controlling, paranoid, and even abusive. That I'd been emotionally manipulative, that I'd kept her trapped. She said she was only with Daniel for her career, that they had a connection, but it meant nothing. She insisted I was blowing everything out of proportion, trying to ruin her reputation, and that she was the victim here. I felt my stomach turn. The lies, the gaslighting, it was like she was trying to turn it around on me, but I wasn't about to let her spin this. I told her I'd had enough, that I wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore, and that I wanted a divorce. She scoffed, said I was just bitter, and stormed off to her bedroom, slamming the door behind her. That night was a blur. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that she'd been sneaking around with her boss, probably for months. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this to me? I thought we had a good life, a future. Turns out she was planning her escape with Daniel all along, and I was just the last to know. The next morning, I started looking into our finances. That's when I found out she'd been secretly transferring her shares of our house, our biggest asset, to her brother, Mark, without telling me. I was stunned. I always thought our house was jointly owned, that we had full control over it. Turns out she'd been planning her exit well in advance, and I had no idea. She claimed I'd abused her somehow, said I was controlling, manipulative, and that's why she was taking everything. The truth was, she'd been secretly planning her escape, and I was just a pawn in her game. Honestly, I don't even know how to feel about it all. I'm furious, hurt, and honestly, a little numb. I kept thinking about all the nights I spent working late, trying to give her a good life, only to find out she was screwing her boss and plotting to take everything from me. I never saw it coming. I thought she loved me, I thought we had something real, but she was just using me, and I was too blind to see it. Now I'm left with a mess, her suing me for half the house, claiming I abused her, and her brother's name all over our property papers. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know one thing. I'm done being the fool. I want justice, and I want to make sure she doesn't get away with this. I'll tell you, nothing prepares you for the shock of realizing your wife's been lying, cheating, and plotting behind your back. It's a nightmare I never saw coming, and honestly, I'm still trying to process it all. After discovering the transfer of the house shares to her brother, Mark, everything changed. I realized Emily had been planning her exit long before I ever suspected. The shock of her betrayal wasn't just about the affair with Daniel. It was also about her sneaky manipulations with our property. I started digging into her financials more, trying to understand how deep her plans went. That's when I uncovered the full extent of her lies. She'd been funneling money, transferring assets, and even hiding some of her income from her job. I found bank statements that showed she'd been secretly saving, perhaps to fund her escape. Meanwhile, she kept up the act, pretending everything was fine, accusing me of being paranoid or abusive whenever I questioned her. She'd call me controlling, say I was trying to trap her, but the truth was, she was the one trying to trap me into a false sense of security, into a marriage she was already planning to walk away from. I felt a mixture of rage and helplessness. How could someone I loved do this? How could she lie so blatantly? I kept asking myself, was there ever any real love? Or was I just a pawn in her game? The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. I wanted to confront her again, but I also knew I had to be strategic. I needed to protect myself legally, financially, and emotionally. That's when I decided to get a lawyer. I needed someone who could help me understand all my options. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in family and property law. I showed him everything: emails, bank statements, the transfer documents, her accusations of abuse. It was a mess, but I needed to fight for what was rightfully mine. I couldn't let her take everything I'd worked for, especially not after all the years I'd put into building our life together. In the meantime, Emily was still acting like everything was normal, but I could see the cracks. She was trying to spin it, telling friends I was abusive, that I was jealous, that she was just trying to protect her career. She even started accusing me of harassment because I kept asking her questions about the money, about her affair, about the house. She played the victim, as always, and insisted she was the one being wronged. I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew she was lying, and I knew she was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. But I also knew I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So I started gathering more evidence, texts, emails, witnesses who might corroborate her lies or her affairs. I wanted to have everything documented, just in case this went to court. The thing that really hit me hard was how quickly she moved to file the lawsuit against me. She claimed I'd abused her, said I'd been physically and emotionally violent, that I'd threatened her. All bullshit. I never laid a finger on her. But she knew that accusing me of abuse would give her leverage, and sure enough, she used it to try to get half the house, claiming I was an unstable, dangerous person. That was her way of cutting me out entirely, of making me look like the bad guy. It was a nightmare trying to counter her claims. I had to prove I wasn't abusive, that I was a decent person. I hired a lawyer, and we started preparing for the inevitable court battle. I also started thinking about how to protect myself financially. I knew she'd try to spin things in her favor, but I had to be ready. I was already feeling drained emotionally and physically, but I couldn't give up. I had to fight for what was mine, for the truth. In the middle of all this chaos, I couldn't help but reflect on how much I'd trusted her, how I'd believed in us, in our future. And now all that trust was shattered. I kept asking myself, was there ever love? Or was I just blind? I thought I knew her. I thought she loved me. Turns out she was just using me to get her way, to cover her tracks, to run from her mistakes. I'm not sure how I'll come out of this, but I know I can't let her win. Not without a fight. By now, things had spiraled so far out of control I felt like I was living in someone else's nightmare. Emily was relentless, trying to spin everything against me, painting herself as the victim and pushing her narrative that I was dangerous and abusive. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to protect myself and clear my name. That's when I decided to dig into her relationship with Daniel even more, because I suspected that their affair wasn't just about a fling or a quick escape. I had a gut feeling there was more to it, something about how she was so eager to hide her tracks, how she'd started transferring money secretly, and how she'd been planning her exit for months. I hired a private investigator. I know, it sounds extreme, but I needed hard proof. I wanted to know exactly how deep the rabbit hole went. The pie followed her to see where she was going, who she was meeting, and what she was hiding. Turns out she'd been meeting Daniel at a fancy hotel downtown, not just for work-related dinners but for secret rendezvous. I got photos, her in the hotel lobby, entering the room, even kissing him goodnight. The evidence was undeniable. The affair was real and it was ongoing. Seeing those photos hit me like a punch in the gut. All the times I'd been suspicious, all the doubts I'd ignored, everything now made sense. She'd been lying straight to my face, all while she was sneaking around with her boss. It was a double betrayal, and I felt so angry I could barely breathe. I also found out she'd been using her work email to coordinate their meetings, covering her tracks with burner phones, and even paying cash for some of her expenses. She'd gone to great lengths to hide everything. With this new evidence, I met with my lawyer again. We drafted a more aggressive legal strategy. I wanted to prove that Emily had been unfaithful and that her secret transfers of the house shares were part of her plan to cheat me out of what was ours. I also wanted to counter her claims that I was abusive, showing that I'd never laid a finger on her, that her accusations were just a way to manipulate the court. I had the photos, the bank records, and witness statements from the pie that confirmed her secret meetings and her financial deception. Meanwhile, Emily's behavior only got more erratic. She started accusing me of stalking her or harassing her, claiming I'd been following her or trying to intimidate her. She even went as far as filing a restraining order. I was stunned. I never once threatened her or tried to hurt her. All I wanted was the truth and to protect my rights. But her narrative was so twisted, she managed to make me look like the crazy one. The court proceedings were brutal. She brought in her own witnesses, people who said I'd been controlling or overly jealous. But I had my own witnesses, people who knew the real Emily, the one who lied, cheated, and manipulated her way out of this mess. It was a war of words and evidence, and I knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her paint me as some monster. I had to show the court the truth, that she'd been lying, cheating, and planning her escape for months. In the middle of all this chaos, I started to realize something. I'd been so caught up in trying to save my marriage, trying to understand her, that I'd lost sight of myself. I'd been putting her needs above mine for so long, ignoring the signs, making excuses. Now I saw clearly what she was capable of, lying, betraying, scheming, and I was furious. But I also knew I had to focus on my own well-being, on rebuilding what I could from this wreckage. I won't lie, it's been the hardest thing I've ever gone through, but I also feel a strange sense of clarity. I learned that trust is fragile, and sometimes people will do anything to get what they want, money, freedom, or just to escape their own mistakes. I don't regret loving her once, but I regret not seeing the signs sooner. If there's one thing I want others to take from this, it's that you have to pay attention to the red flags. Because when someone is lying to your face and secretly planning their escape, you need to fight for yourself before it's too late. By the time the court date was approaching, I was exhausted but also more determined than ever. The evidence I had collected was solid: photos, bank statements, witness testimonies, all pointing to Emily's betrayal and her attempt to cheat me out of what was legally ours. The main issue was her claim that I was abusive, which was so far removed from the truth that it almost seemed laughable. But I knew how these things played out in court. She'd try to paint me as the villain, and I had to be ready to counter that with facts and calmness. Emily's legal team was aggressive, trying to discredit everything I brought forward. They argued that I'd been controlling, that I'd isolated her, and that her transfer of house shares was a result of her fear of me. They even tried to suggest I was violent, citing some supposed incidents that, in reality, were fabricated or taken out of context. I was furious, but I kept my composure. I knew that if I lost my temper or got emotional, I'd give them ammunition. I had to stay focused, present my case clearly, and let the evidence speak for itself. Meanwhile, Emily was doing everything she could to sway public opinion. She was spreading rumors among friends and family, claiming I was an abusive, jealous monster who had kept her trapped. She even hired a lawyer to file for full custody of the house and to have me labeled as an unfit husband. It was a dirty game, but I refused to sink to her level. I knew the truth, and I had to fight for it. One of the most shocking moments came during the court hearing when Emily's lawyer tried to bring up her claim of abuse. They presented some evidence, but it was flimsy, nothing concrete, just her word and some anonymous accusations. I stood there calmly and presented my own evidence: the photos, the bank records, the witness statements, and the recordings of her secret meetings with Daniel. I explained how her claims were part of her attempt to manipulate the court and hide her infidelity. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions. I could see the skepticism in her eyes, and I knew I had to be precise. I told the court how Emily had been secretly transferring her shares of the house to her brother, Mark, weeks before she filed for divorce. I explained how she'd lied about her reasons for leaving, claiming abuse, when in fact she'd been planning her escape with her lover all along. I also pointed out that she'd been using her work email and burner phones to coordinate her meetings, all while trying to portray herself as the victim. After hours of testimony and presentation of evidence, the judge finally made her ruling. She dismissed Emily's claims of abuse as unfounded and ruled that the transfer of shares to Mark was invalid because it was done without my knowledge and under false pretenses. She ordered Emily to return the shares to the estate and awarded me full custody of the house. The court also recognized the deception and financial manipulation Emily had engaged in, and she was ordered to pay damages for her illegal transfers. The relief I felt was indescribable. For the first time in months, I felt like I was getting my life back, but the emotional toll was heavy. I realized how much I'd been blindsided, how someone I loved could betray me so completely. I also learned the importance of standing up for myself, of not letting someone else's lies and schemes destroy what I'd worked for. Since the court ruling, I've been slowly rebuilding. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I've been focusing on my own future, trying to forget the betrayal and move on. It's not easy, and I still have bad days, but I know I've done everything I could to get justice. And I want anyone reading this to know. Never ignore the red flags, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Because sometimes, the person you love the most can turn out to be the biggest liar and manipulator. And when that happens, you have to stand your ground, no matter how painful the truth is. Looking back, I never thought I'd be the guy who'd go through something like this, betrayed, lied to, and almost destroyed financially by someone I loved. But here I am, stronger for having survived it all. The whole experience has been a brutal lesson in trust, deception, and resilience. I used to think I knew Emily, that she was my partner, my future. Turns out, she was just a master manipulator, spinning lies and scheming behind my back for her own gain. The hardest part isn't just losing the relationship, it's realizing how blind I'd been for so long, ignoring the signs, making excuses, telling myself it was just work stress or a rough patch. But deep down, I knew something was off. I wish I'd trusted my instincts sooner, but I also know that I couldn't have prevented her from planning everything behind my back. Still, I regret not seeing the warning signs earlier, not fighting harder to protect myself. This whole ordeal has left me with a new perspective. I've learned that sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be your biggest enemies. It's made me more cautious, more aware of the importance of safeguarding your own interests, especially emotionally and financially. I also realized how crucial it is to document everything, to stand up for yourself, even when it's easier to stay quiet and hope things will get better. As for Emily, I hope she gets what she's looking for, though I doubt she'll find happiness in lies and betrayal. I've moved on not because I want to forget, but because I realize I deserve better. I've started focusing on rebuilding my life, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, and taking care of myself. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I'll come out of this wiser, stronger, and more cautious about who I trust. To anyone out there who might be going through something similar, I want to say this: don't ignore the red flags. Trust your gut, gather evidence if you need to, and don't be afraid to fight for yourself. Love is important, but so is your self-respect. Never let someone manipulate and lie to the point where they can ruin your life. You have to be your own advocate, even when it's hard. Because in the end, the truth always comes out, sometimes in the most painful way, but it's better than living in a lie. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'll keep moving forward. I'll rebuild what was broken, learn from my mistakes, and remember that, above all, I am worthy of honesty and respect. Nothing can take away the lessons I've learned, and I refuse to let this betrayal define my life. I'll keep going, stronger than ever, because I've realized that sometimes the only way to truly move on is to face the truth head on and never look back.